Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be talking about the lovely Chicago, or maybe some of the not so lovely things about it. So I did grow up in a relatively smaller town in Wisconsin, and then I went to school in Milwaukee, then I moved to Chicago. So living in a large city has definitely been a bit of a culture shock for me. And I remember when we were considering moving to Chicago, I looked up and read a lot of articles about pros and cons and just the things that you should know before moving here. And I would say that now that I've lived here for about 2 years, some of those I agree with, and some of those aren't so black and white. So this is just kind of my unfiltered opinions about the things that I've noticed, the good things, the bad things. Everyone's opinions can be subjective, but I think that it's very interesting to hear other people's perspectives. And for me, coming from, a small town to then living in Milwaukee, which is not quite as big of a city, and now living here, I just wanted to talk about things that I've noticed and how I've adjusted to the whole experience. So let's get into the video. Okay, so the first thing, which may be expected, is that it is very expensive here. When I lived in Milwaukee, I lived in a house with 2 roommates, and I still paid $400 a month. You're probably not gonna find that here unless you're living with 5 or 6 roommates in a 2-bedroom apartment. 3 bedrooms if you're lucky. And even just going off of that, everything is increased in price. Gas, groceries, activities. I feel like when you move to a city, like a big city, you expect it, but I didn't realize how crazy the price difference was. When I lived back home, I paid $2 for bread, where here you could pay $4, maybe even $5 right now with how crazy prices are. We live by a lake, which is amazing, but it can only be utilized 3 months out of the year. And on top of that, there's a lot of water activities that I wouldn't be able to do as much as I would like to because it's so expensive to rent any sort of kayak or paddleboard. And typically people live in smaller apartments, so you don't really have room to buy your own and store them. So if you're looking into moving to the city, I would definitely look into how expensive everything costs, not just rent. Because even though I knew it would be more pricey, I didn't really expect that it would be to this extent. That being said, there are a lot of free activities that you can do. There's free zoos, free parks, free museums. Most of the beaches are free, so if you just want to go chill on the beach. So there are plenty of free or affordable activities. But if you're coming from a small town or a small city, it just might be an adjustment in activities that you do. Another thing we need to talk about is transportation. And I know some people may disagree with me on this, I know my boyfriend does, but getting around can be quite difficult. I would say walking is probably your easiest option. I know Chicago does have one of the better public transportation systems in the US, but that being said, it is still public transportation. If you want to just go somewhere quick or leave at a reasonable time and still get to work or wherever you're going on time, that might not be possible. Unless you're lucky enough to walk up right as the train or the bus is pulling up, you're probably going to be stuck waiting there for a while. I feel like 50% of the times that I have tried to take public transportation, it has been delayed in some way. And all this makes sense, but it's just not something that I was used to, because if I had to be to work at 8, I could leave at 7:45 and be there by 8, which is not the case. I would recommend leaving at least 15 minutes earlier than the amount of time that it says it's going to take you. If you're going to have a vehicle in the city, that kind of creates a whole other set of issues. Obviously, traffic is insane. If you need to go 2 miles, it could take you 20 minutes or more. The price of parking is crazy. We pay $250 a month to park our vehicle in our building. And for our area, that's actually on the cheaper side of what parking usually costs. If you want to have a vehicle that maybe you just don't use every day, but if you want to have one for going out of town, I would recommend, there's like lots north of the city that are maybe like $100, $150 a month, and you could just like take the train to go pick up your car. But yeah, unless most of the places you're going are within walking distance, it can be a little bit tricky to get around. Another tip that I just want to give is don't fully rely on your phone like GPS to get around in the city. It's something with the city structure, all the big buildings, your GPS can get very confused and not know where you are at all. It does work most of the time, especially if you put in your location like before you get to the city. But if you don't know your way around, you obviously don't want to get lost and then end up in a place that you don't really want to be. So I would recommend at least knowing relatively where it is you're going, like what street, what landmarks are around it, so you at least have an idea if your GPS isn't working. Another thing that I read in a lot of the articles is that people in Chicago are a lot friendlier than in other big cities. I have not really lived in any other like really big cities, so I guess that I don't really have much to compare it to as far as that goes. The articles were like making it seem like people here are so friendly, and like some of them were even talking about how, you know, you'll definitely be friends with your neighbors. You know, usually I feel like I would walk down the street and I would smile at people, or I would be like, hi, or whatever. People don't do that here. Granted, we moved here during COVID, so everyone was wearing masks, so if you smiled at someone, they couldn't see it. But since the masks have come off, if you smile at someone, especially like if you're on public transportation or in a store or something, they kind of get creeped out. Like, I've smiled at people before and then they just go like, most people just kind of mind their own business. They don't really want to make small talk. I've noticed that the area that we live in now is a lot more family orientated, so I think that like we do probably have a little bit more small talk in elevators and stuff like that. But I've gone into like UPS stores to drop off my packages and been like, oh hi, how are you? And the person has gone, you're not from here, are you? Just based on the fact that I like asked them how they were doing. So yeah, I think it definitely depends on the location that you're living in the city, but if you're coming from not a big city, you will probably find that people aren't as friendly. Another thing, which probably is no secret, but the winters are terrible. It is very, very cold here, and although it doesn't snow a ton compared to like Wisconsin, we do get a decent amount of snow. Another side note about parking in the winter, if you're parking on the street and it snowed, it's going to be difficult for you. Usually if people are parking on both sides of the street, they just like don't plow it because it's like too hard to get the plow down the road. So there may be like a foot of snow on the street that just doesn't get plowed. Another thing people do is they save their spots. So anything you have, lawn chairs, buckets, just jugs of water, people will put in on the street, like in their parking spot, to save it so that no one else can park there. They're not supposed to do that. Occasionally I know that the police have like gone around and removed that stuff, but it does make it very annoying if you just want to find a space like during the day for work. I know that was always my problem, is I would literally just want to be parked there during the day, but I couldn't find any spots because people were saving their spots for when they would come home, which I get it. It's difficult to parallel park in general, especially in the winter, but it is just like very frustrating. But yeah, the winters, the main thing is just they are very cold and they are very long. Usually it starts getting cold here in, I would say, I guess it depends how you define cold. Usually like October is still in like the 50s, maybe even 60s, and sometimes November is too, but I would say the second half of November is when it starts getting down to like the 40s. December it's like in the 30s, and then that pretty much lasts, like 30s or below pretty much lasts until like end of March, maybe even end of April. So it's kind of a bummer because you can't even enjoy being outside at some of those temperatures. I don't know, I mean some people like the cold, but for me, it's not enjoyable. The last thing that I want to mention, because it's probably the thing that surprised me the most when I moved here, is that for a city, Chicago is actually really dog friendly. You might struggle with finding places that allow pets or allow certain breeds of dogs, but I know that like we live in a dog friendly building and it feels like every single person here has a dog. A lot of the buildings that are dog friendly will have like small little dog parks, so it's nice if you need to like take your dog out late at night or something. Even if your building doesn't, Chicago does have a lot of parks in general, but also just like a lot of dog parks. And I feel like every apartment that we toured last summer when we were looking for places, we were always like close, a very short walk to a dog park. Also, there's like a whole dog beach, which is one of my favorite places, even though we don't even have a dog, but I would just go there to watch the dogs play and stuff. And to be honest, almost all of the dogs that I've met have been like super well trained, super well behaved. Some people even walk their dogs off leash in the city, which is something that I would never do, but they're fine. Like they just know the way, they stop at the crosswalks. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of dogs. There's definitely a lot of dog owners. So if you have a dog or are considering getting one, in my opinion, this is a good city for that. So yeah, I think those are pretty much the main things that I wanted to talk about. Obviously, there's so much more about Chicago, but I think those are the things that surprised me the most upon moving here and now living here for a while. If you have any other questions, feel free to put them in the comments below and I will answer them the best I can. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. And if you want to be notified about future videos, please hit the subscribe button below. It would make me really happy. And yeah, I guess I'll see you guys in the next video. All right, bye.